There's going to be some fun competition this spring.
You are Locked On Huskies, your daily podcast on the Washington Huskies, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back into another edition of the Locked On Huskies podcast. I'm Roman Tomashoff. That's Lars Hansen. He's the site editor with Athlon Sports' Inside the Huskies. I'm the site editor with Huskies Wire. Thank you for making this your first watch or first listen today, as we are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And just a reminder, wherever you're getting this, if you're here with us on YouTube, on Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music, anything like that, make sure you subscribe. Hit that follow button. If you're audio only, leave us a 5-star review. If you're here on YouTube, click a like on the video. Leave us a comment down below with your favorite spring battle that you're going to watch. We're going to tell you exactly what that is in just a second. And click that little bell so you don't miss when we post a new video, because there's a lot of fun bonus stuff that we're going to be dropping over the next couple of weeks with spring practice. Just under a week away. Lars, that being said, we've got a whole bunch of recruiting stuff we're going to get to today, like 2027 four-star offensive lineman Reis Russell, who named Washington as his leader in an interview with our buddy Scott Eklund. We'll get there. Looks like Washington's top wide receiver target, four-star Mason James, is also nearing a decision, but spring battles to watch. I know I made that sound a little mysterious. It's really fun. Yesterday, we talked about Tacario Davis versus Denzel Boston, what that might look like. What are some other ones that are going to be a lot of fun to watch?
Well, I think the fun part about it is, unlike last spring where you had to find just bodies in general, we were going through it before the show, and it's like, man, like there's so many individual battles that we can go with. So I'll go with the one that I went off the top with, where part of spring ball, guys enrolling early and things like that, and just kind of making that first initial impression. Because a lot of the guys that played in spring last year were significant contributors in the fall. So just keep that in mind when I say this. Anterio Thompson, new interior defensive lineman versus Paki Finau, where Paki is going to probably play more guard right now. And I think, when you're looking at, the emergence of, the return of Gear and Hatchett and kind of how is the interior going to look, that's also why you beefed up both lines to say, hey, you know what, Paki? We didn't bring anybody else in the portal. We got Guerin just as a, almost like an insurance policy where he's not going to guarantee start at right or left guard, but he's going to push guys like Paki. But at the same time, you want to make sure the guy opposing Paki, like Anterio Thompson coming from Iowa, Western Michigan, is going to give him a good challenge. And so I'm really thinking, because, man, every time I see Paki, whether it was at the basketball game or just wherever, it's like he looks like a guy who's ready to play. Even more so, and this is no shot, obviously, because you know how much I like him, Parker Rutherford, where you looked at him and it's like, ooh, like, man, if you got a stiff breeze, like, I'm a little worried here. But in that respect, it's like, can you put it all together? And I think the fact that he's got a full year in the program, now you got the spring, this is one where you could really see a major growth in Paki.
Oh, I absolutely love this. It's two really good athletes going at it. And it's something we also talked about yesterday in terms of what's going on in terms of offensive line versus defensive line. And it's the 5-1-5 is going to create one-on-one matchups for offensive linemen that it's going to force them to get a lot better. And then when you see some more four-man fronts as you get over the course of the season, honestly, it might make life a little easier. That's a different discussion for a different day. But I love this because, like I said, two really good athletes going at it and somebody in Anterio Thompson who has some Big Ten experience. He knows what it takes to play and succeed in that conference against Paki Finau, who rising, stars, as you would say with anybody who talks about him around the program, and certainly could start at right guard this season. So seeing what that's going to look like is going to be really fun. I'm going to shift over one spot where the number one that I, talked about when we were thinking up this segment, we're like, ooh, this could be fun. It's Simote Pepa versus Landen Hatchett. Now, you reference Parker Brailsford, so I also want to take it back to 2023 for a moment. When the show was started and everything, I remember one of the first things you and I talked about on the show was when our good buddy Ryan Grubb got up in front of the microphone and he said, yeah, somebody who's going to play a lot this year is Landen Hatchett. And as any Husky fan knows, from that era, it took a lot to earn Ryan Grubb's trust. And the fact that Landen Hatchett did that as a true freshman says a lot. Then, of course, he suffers the unfortunate injury at the end of the year, is still able to play last season, but certainly needed a lot of help just in terms of he had a long way to go in terms of strength and conditioning after tearing his ACL. Now, like you said with Paki, having a full offseason in the strength program is going to benefit him. He's at his natural position of center, and he's going to face a just truly a load to handle on the defensive line in Simote Pepa, who is a big physical presence at 340 pounds, was really good at Utah in 2022. And then the production ticked down when he had a couple of injuries. But seeing what that one-on-one battle is going to look like is something I'm so excited to watch, because talking about competition, talking about iron sharpening iron, all those football adages that I complained about yesterday, it's getting better. And watching those two guys go at it is really something that's going to be so beneficial for Big Ten play, and especially at positions of need that Washington just really struggled at last season.
Yeah, I don't know if it's by intention or coincidence, but Pepa puts the capital P in presence. Like, my God,
Yeah.
like that absolute unit. But as I was thinking about that, if you look at it and think everything last season was about building the foundation, you speak about talking to people around the program. I remember when I got to go interview Garrett and Landen Hatchett. By the way, go check that out on our page, Locked On Huskies.
It's here on YouTube, yeah.
That was a fun interview. One thing I talked to him was about, like, hey, like, who, like are you like the guy, like the recruiter, like because it seemed like and it turns out, basically, and that's not really a surprise, but it's like, Landen plays a big role in recruiting in terms of, guys when players come and visit and things like that. In the similar way that Jonah is the heartbeat, it's like Landen being the heartbeat of the offensive line and really setting that tone. Like, he also, the reason why he looked like he could play as a freshman was, like, again, similar to Paki. He had the frame. Like, you just looked at him and it's like, wait, that's a freshman? Like 6'2", 6'3", 303 or whatever he was listed at. And you just looked at him and like, yeah, they don't figure something out for him. It's like, you can play with that size. Where with Parker, it was, well, he's, like 6'1", 6 on the shorter-ish side, 272. I remember the conversation. We were at a practice, and I think it was Varel or somebody had asked the question, where it was Mike Varel, shout out, friend of the program, where he was like, how do you gain like 15 pounds in a 3-week period? Like, how do you plan on accomplishing that? Whereas Landen, it's like, no, you already got the foundation there. And now, to use, as you always say, my favorite word, Jedd's favorite word, the foundation was built last year. You have the relationship with Damon and Landen, so you're building on top of it. This isn't, hey, well, now we got to break in Landen. And so the reason why I bring that up is all these matchups, it's about actually bringing the best out of guys, not having to lay that foundation. Like, hey, now you got to figure out this. Now you got to learn can you lead the offense? It's like, no, Landen can absolutely do it. The other thing that intrigues me, speaking of guys that are, sophomores and emerging and things like that, the one question I asked you before the program, you have Decker DeGraff at tight end. Who is the Decker DeGraff of linebackers? In a way, it's not necessarily a great like-for-like comparison, but Budal Lukta, like we talked about it a little bit on yesterday's show, where Decker is going to do so many different things for this offense, I think. Just because he's got so much athleticism, so much versatility, great hands, understands, just really just kind of seems like, this is a terrible cliche, but he's a football guy. Like, you know the cliche. He's he plays football, so I hope to God he's a football guy. But he just really understands. Also, a great down to earth kid. But I think about that and how impactful Buda's been on defense for Wazoo, and you think, how can Ryan Walters in that 5-1-5 scheme, test Decker, and how can they bring the best out of each other? Because I think the more you can help your defense, also then it allows Decker to think, oh, wow, if they're covering me like this, how do I do this? And I think when you look at what is this offense, you're trying to unlock this offense this year, that's one key component is going to be that over-the-middle threat.
I absolutely love that. I wanted to talk about one more in a similar light, and it's just breeding competition, right? It's what we're going to see in the slot, where there's going to be a competition for the starting nickel role between Dyson McCutcheon and Rahshawn Clark, most likely, from what I understand. And when I watch Rahshawn Clark, I see a really fun athlete who we watched move all over the formation last year. We saw him play safety, we saw him play outside corner, and we saw him play nickel. Now, as it seems like he's going to fight with Dyson for that nickel spot, I want to see how he matches up with Kevin Green, because you and I talked about this last fall when Kevin Green came in. It was, hey, he's got a nice rapport with Damon Williams. Damon was hitting him a lot, just some of those quick hitters when he needed just a safety blanket to get the ball out. He was finding Kevin Green. Kevin Green's a really good route runner. So watching those two go at it in man coverage, in space, in some of these one-on-one opportunities that we're going to get a chance to watch, which are one of my favorite parts of practice, I'm really excited to see what that's going to look like, because as we've said with all these guys, it's going to bring the best out of all of them. Lars, we need to talk about Mason James, because Washington's in a better spot for him than people think. And we'll get to that right after a message from our friends over at Supply House. Get the supplies you need from the site made for the skilled trades, Supply House. Whether you're in plumbing, HVAC, or electrical work, Supply House is the reliable way to order products online. Their easy-to-use website is packed with helpful resources and the latest product info to help you get the job done right. Plus, with a complete inventory of over 200,000 parts from 400 plus top brands, you'll find exactly what you need delivered fast from coast to coast. Need help with an order? Supply House offers expert support and industry-leading service, so you'll always talk to a real person. And for trade pros looking for an extra edge, their free Trade Master program offers exclusive perks like a dedicated phone line, free shipping, and discounts on every order. Thousands of skilled professionals are already taking advantage. Now it's your turn. Join the Trade Master program today at supplyhouse.com/TM and start ordering plumbing, HVAC, and electrical supplies with just a few clicks. Plus, use promo code SH5 for 5% off your first order. That's supplyhouse.com. So, Lars, when we look at Mason James, there was a report put out by On3's Chad Simmons on Tuesday as we're recording this, saying that he talked to Mason James, who told him, hey, I might decide sooner rather than later. Originally, the plan was he was going to commit in the summer following his official visits, where he's got 4 listed on 247. That's Arizona State, Missouri, Oklahoma, and Washington. So Washington's in a good spot for him. I don't think as of right now, if he were to commit, say at the end of the week, after he visits Notre Dame, that Washington will earn that commitment. But if he still wants to take his official visits, follow through with all that, I really like the position that Kevin Cummings and his staff has put the Huskies in.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those where I don't want to say it's like that, the Trey McDuffie, the Sean McGrew commitments where, everyone thought it was, either Stanford and UCLA respectively for those two guys, and they both ended up committing to Washington. I don't think it's necessarily like that, because that's a great kind of analogy where if you, let's say he commits on Friday, is it Washington, or the only other school, in my opinion, would be Oklahoma. So it's one of those two schools at this point, because when I talked to him a couple of weeks ago after his junior day visit, it was, oh no, he definitely wants to get back up here. Like, even before it had been publicized correctly that he was coming up for his official visit in, I think, May, right? It's
June 6th is the weekend.
June 6th is right. I can never keep track of them. I knew it was late that May 31st June weekend or that first weekend of June. But when he told me that, he's like, let me check, because I had to go through his notes. But he's like, no, I'm definitely getting back up there. I just want to get around the players. I want to spend more time with the players. I want to basically become I'm not taking his words out of context, but in my opinion, you could frame it as almost like, I want to learn what it's like to be a Husky. Like, I want to be almost like a Husky for 48 hours and see what that's like. And to your point of now, hey, well, that track is sped up. I don't think it's Missouri, just because, no disrespect to Kellen, Kirby and those guys, Eli down there. I just, the way, it seems like obviously SEC school, good school. I just don't think, that would probably be the highest surprise if he goes there. Notre Dame, obviously Texas, other ones making a push more recently. It's like, okay, that would be a concern for, like, hey, like, if he commits and then flips, like, those would be the schools where it's like, hey, like, we're talking November, December, oh, he ends up signing with X school. That I could see. But right now, I would put the battle between Oklahoma and Washington. And the interesting thing that and there's no shot at Chad Simmons when I say this, but like what we talked about before the show, which was, what was the context in which the, question was framed, when it's like, you get a kid saying, hey, Oklahoma was always there for me, this and that. It's like, right, well, but was it just like 3 or 4 questions about Oklahoma, or was it like, hey, what's the latest? And the kid unprompted says, hey, Oklahoma's always been there. Like, hey, like, I'm getting pretty close. Like, it's between this school and that school, but Oklahoma. I think once you see a kid saying it's between this school and that school, and they keep referencing the other school and by name, okay, now you're probably saying, hey, it's probably not going to be Washington. But I think, honestly, when I talked to him, he mentioned, Kevin Cummings come out twice, during the visit period, having a good and he also the thing that intrigued me the most, and it might be the most telling, he said Jedd Fisch has put a lot of legwork in. Like, Jedd Fisch has really made an impact in terms of building an actual connection, not just turning it over to Kevin and Caleb Wilson, the assistant receivers coach, who's also played a significant role as well. That can't go under. So, because that's the NFL connection. You have a guy that played in the NFL, a guy that sent to the NFL, and a guy that coached in the NFL. As a receiver, like, that's what you want to do. I want to be developed and go to the NFL. But then there's also the appeal of, hey, well, it's Oklahoma, it's the SEC. So, like, he does have 2 very good, in my opinion, decisions to make in terms of which one are you going to go. But then also, if you don't, it's like when is the soon? How soon is soon? What's the context of soon?
Where, yeah, that's absolutely a very fair point. Where if that decision comes this spring, before he comes back out to Washington, that's the point we're getting at. Where, hey, Oklahoma certainly leads in that regard, but you got to keep an eye on these sort of things because recruiting, as everybody knows at this point in time, is very volatile, and that's not a shot at any one recruit in general. That's just the landscape. Where if Mason does end up coming back out to Washington, that is, and he's still uncommitted, even if he comes back out and he's, say, committed to Oklahoma, but he still wants to come out and take his official visit to Washington, still a great sign where nothing is over in this point in time until a recruit signs. That's just, again, the reality of the situation. But I think you make a great point because, as you said, you talked to him, and as we were prepping for the show, it was, hey, he was so sold on this aspect of Washington, on that one. And we know that he's the top wide receiver on Washington's board right now. So it's something I've heard from other people that I've talked to in terms of 2026 recruits, different things like that. It's, hey, Jedd has really taken a hands-on approach on the recruiting trail. It's not one of those things where there are some schools where it's, hey, yeah, the head coach is pretty busy, and when you get on campus, you'll have time to meet him. That's certainly not the approach that Jedd has taken, where he's gone out to recruits and said, hey, you're my top priority at X position, at Y position. You're my top priority overall, where those are conversations he's certainly having, which is an interesting part of this and is certainly a solid sell if you're a recruit. And when it comes to Mason James, and you look at what the 2025 class was, where it's a whole bunch of talented receivers, there's certainly a very strong argument for him to be made to join that class and join up with, Raiden Vines, right? Marcus Harris, a former Oklahoma commit, where, if he does come back on campus, it's, hey, Marcus, you were at Oklahoma, you end up at Washington. Tell me a little bit more about that. These are all, and again, because as you said, it is a battle between Oklahoma and Washington from our understanding of the matter. Those are all conversations that can be had on an official visit. And you just have to keep pushing, which is something we know that Kevin Cummings, Jedd Fisch, and the staff love to do.
You know what's also hilarious? The other receiver that we're not, again, this is mostly about Mason James, as you mentioned, but it's worth noting because you mentioned the Marcus Harris aspect. Daniel Odom.
Yeah.
Another Oklahoma wide receiver commit. It's like, at some point we got to get to Oklahoma, Washington, home and home. Like, I know those are kind of dying off these days, but with that being said, it's like those are the cool, like that's the reason why I say that is it's an SEC versus Big Ten school. That's where the sport is trending. It's going in the direction of there's the Power 2, and then there's really everybody else, even the MAC, the ACC, the SWAC. I don't know how many other conferences are still there.
Too many conferences.
But the point being that like you're going head to head for some of these battles because this is the premium talent. Now the interesting thing with Mason James is he's from Oklahoma, like I said, like you mentioned it. So that's the interesting tie in where the fact that you're giving that kid a lot to think about while also flipping kids from California. Well, Marcus didn't officially flip it. You get my point. And then potentially Daniel Odom as well. Like that's a proven record now. Where Kevin Cummings is going like, wow, like if I have a choice between Oklahoma and Washington, the SEC or the Big Ten, I want to go to Washington. And I think if you can secure Mason James' commitment, that would just add another feather in KC and Jedd Fisch's hats, where it's you could do this, or you could come and be developed and be a pro. And I think that as cliche as it sounds, that is a winning sell right now.
So let's talk about, because you mentioned Daniel Odom. I want to dive into that the last minute or two that we got here before we move on, where I'm really curious to see what this wide receiver class is going to shape up as. Because you've got one commit in Terrence Sarian. We know they're pushing for Luke Weaver from Notre Dame in Southern California. And there are also a whole bunch of these 4-stars that are committed to other programs that they're making a push for, with Daniel Odom and Madden Williams being the two names that come to mind right away. And shout out to CJ Lavender, who just straight up said their names when he committed and chatted with us last week. Go check that out as well. Or those are all things that I'm really interested in, because like that's a big part of just especially what Kevin Cummings' game has been so far, not just at Washington, but at Arizona, when you talk about his recruitment of Cyril McMillan, where very different situation, but he's proven he can do that. He hasn't necessarily done a, top 100 flip yet at Washington, but he showed that, hey, Marcus Harris, yeah, we were able to get him from Oklahoma after he decommitted. We're still able to win these big time battles. And I think he's got a chance to really prove himself in the 2026 class by headlining this class with somebody like Mason James, and then still supplementing a Daniel Odom or Madden Williams if he possibly can.
But we're talking about premium talent either way. Now, again, whether it's a 5-star or 4, like he to your point, he hasn't flipped Chris Henry Jr. But I mean, like, my God, like that would be I'm just throwing that out there as an example to be clear. Like, there's no offer, and I'm not like, that type of like, hey, like if you can go and flip a number 1 player at that position, that's one thing. But still developing consistent year in a year, like it's almost, which would you rather have, the one-time flip or the consistent year in, year out production? Hey, 4-star to 4-star to 4-star to 4-star, who do also develop and get better, not just their 4-star and labeled and
for sure,
like a certain school down south.
Oh no, I completely agree. It is absolutely about the consistency, and that's something Washington has shown it can do. But it's about pairing the two together, right? It's about having that consistency, and then not necessarily, I don't want to say every once in a while, but whenever possible, just being like, hey, we can also go add this guy. That's what it's about. That's the most important thing on the recruiting trail. And especially for the, what this Jedd Fisch offense is, you'd love to see how that can work out, especially, with everything going on with Brady Smigel, and still assuming that he ends up at Washington as the crystal balls line up and everything like that. But Lars, there are so many more recruits that we need to get to, starting with Reis Russell, who looks like a big time prospect in 2027. And we'll get to that right after a message from our friends over at Monarch Money. Ever check your bank account and wonder, where did all my money go? Between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment, it's easy to lose track. That's where Monarch Money comes in. Your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app, it's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place, so you stop just managing your money and start building wealth. When I started using Monarch, I realized just how much I was spending on food delivery. Now I budget smarter and save more. Instead of juggling multiple apps, you can use Monarch to check your finances, track spending, and even plan long-term goals. Managing money with your partner is smoother than ever. You can track shared and personal accounts, set goals, and stay on the same page without the stress. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKDOWNCollege at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKDOWNCollege for half off your first year. So Lars, I'm sure there's some everydayers been like, 2027 is a long way off. Who cares? But it's still something that certainly deserves to be mentioned, especially when Reis Russell, a 4-star prospect on the interior offensive line from Roger Rosengarten's high school, shout out Valor Christian, did an interview with our good buddy Scott Eklund over at dogman.com and said, hey, I was in attendance for Washington's junior day, and I was so impressed that Washington is my leader right now. Kids obviously are going to say a lot of things, but you go and you read some of the comments. It's a VIP article, so make sure you subscribe to them over there as well. But you go and you read some of those comments and you say, yeah, it seems like the pitch that Michael Switzer has on the recruiting trail is really paying off.
I wish we had some of those sound effects like the breaking news, like dun 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 dun, like. And I don't mean that as a shot at Scott, but it's just like, if you follow Reis on Twitter and just see any interactions, like, you can clearly tell the dude is enamored with Washington. I don't mean that it's like, it's a good thing, but it's very good to know that Washington now like stated as like, hey, like, I'm confident going out on record and saying, hey, Washington is the number 1 school for me right now. And I think that also is a good thing early on, when the fact that you're talking about a 4-star guy from a big prominent high school in Colorado, who also now, congratulations, Mike Sanford, one-time Boise State assistant coach, and I think also head coach. Head coach in Colorado, obviously, when that whole thing with Carl Durrell fell out. But so now him going back there and he's getting good coaching, which again ties into everything the coaching staff said back in February, which is we want guys from well-established high schools, good coaching where we can coach them up even better. You see that exactly with Reis, where he's the guy where, like, that's a linchpin. Like, Roger, I think, was the 3rd or 4th offensive line commit when he came in 2020. I want to say at the time, like, he wasn't. My point is, he wasn't the first. And so the fact that you could possibly get Reis Russell to be the first in 2027 and set that ball rolling, that would be a major win for Michael Switzer on the recruiting show, because we've seen Easton Taffa back off his decision and then end up at USC, and you've seen a couple other ones where yes, you have Ariane Yang, but it's one of those, man, like, could we just get a win? Could we just get? And it's not a bad thing. It's not anti-Switzer. It's just like, I will say what is interesting is, there was some level of recruitment that he did, but it wasn't like he was like actively. It was more so a game planning side of things, and would handshake guys when they came up to practice. But it wasn't like all these guys knew him. So some of these guys had to take a little bit of time getting to know him.
Right, because it's one of those things where if you go and you do your research and you read into the comments, it's he was recruited, like he was helping in on-campus recruiting, because that's the extent that assistants are, that aren't designated to go out on the trail are allowed to do. So it's, Champ Talialia referenced him, I believe. John Mills is another one, or Lowen Coleman Brusa. It was another thing that our buddy Scott had. And it's one of those things where now that he is, the full offensive line coach, it is his job, he is the recruiter. I feel like 2027 is going to be a true test where 2026 could be really solid, right? We've talked about Sam Utu, about Dominic Harris, Aaron Thomas, the guys who have official visits set up right now, where that's going to be something to keep an eye on. But 2027, if you're able to pull in Reis Russell, Jacoba Doyle from Puyallup High School, looks like he could be the number one player in the state. Those are going to be even bigger tests. Especially in recruiting, you can't ever give a coach a pass for a season, but this is just kind of the litmus test of, can you close on these guys? And then next year it's, hey, you need to close on this guy. Like it's just that important especially when you come in late in the cycle, you've got one commit who was firmly committed to your offensive line coach at the time, which, again, like, I know these things sound silly and they'll sound like excuses, but that's just the reality of the situation, where it's just curious, because I think that this 27 class could shape up in a really good way, but it doesn't matter right now or just in terms of the general scheme of things, where if Reis Russell commits in a month, great. That's awesome. You could look at it like Ansu Sanoe in the 26 class, where he committed really early. That's a really big win for Scotty Graham, and he's stayed consistent, and he's helped recruit other guys. Like these are things that happen in this world of college football, which is still very volatile, but those commitments can still hold true at the same point in time. There are a couple of really interesting official visits then, and I know we can use this to talk about one of your favorite players, Landen Miri. 3-star tight end Kekua Omua from IMG Academy sent an official visit for the last weekend of June.
See, I think that one, this is one where when we saw it a little bit, and this is no slight at Jedd, but with Kalen, where it's, okay, when you bring in certain guys, it's either you're putting them off to say, that's the guy that we want. Like when Brady Smigel comes up, I think on that last weekend, he'll probably already be committed at that point. I'm just going to go out there and say that at this point. That's not being sourced. I'm just going to be surprised if he's not committed to Washington by the time he comes up for that visit. But you look at that and say, okay, well, hey, if you made it this far, like if you make it through your other visits and you still want to come on, that's awesome. That's great. We get your last visit. Otherwise, it's, hey, well, like if you do want to consider us, but you're prioritizing other schools, that's, we'll put you in the last weekend, and it'll be a good weekend to have you because there's a lot of other guys committed, so it'll give you a good impression. It's a win-win in the coaching staff's book.
Sure.
But to me, I was actually ironically going to talk about Landen, because it's one of those where he seems like a guy where, I'm not saying in the Mason James mode, but I would imagine like that. He's on an interesting track where he's still getting new offers and new schools like, UNC and others not emerging, but just, trying to build up that relationship. But he really does seem enamored with Washington, and it's almost like You ever watch Gilligan's Island back in the day?
Can't say that I did.
Okay, anyway, so this is for the older viewers here, because I'm young. There was the hut where Gilligan, there was an entire straw hut. The reason why I'm saying is there was a straw hut, and Gilligan literally just pulls one random straw out, and the entire thing collapses. Now it's not a collapse, but in this case, who's going to be the first one to pull it out? And the entire wave of commits. Is it Brady Smigel? Is it Landen? Somebody I feel like in the 26th class in the month of April is, I'd say probably within the first week of April, let's say, is going to have to say, hey, who's going to be the first? Because once the first one comes in, then somebody else is going to. And then you start saying that's 3, 4, 5, 6. And it's like, wow, right when spring ball gets going, now they're having like all these wave of commits. And it's partially because maybe kids are coming up for those visits, and partially it's, hey, we're getting into spring, schools are coming to see you. It's like, do you want to plant your Washington flag or not? And I think a lot of guys having come up, and that's why that junior day date was so important, was before spring ball, before all this. It's like, hey, we want to prioritize you. We want to make sure you're an investment, not just, hey, come and check us out of the practice when you can, and we'll slope it. It's like, no, we want you to say that you are committed to Washington, because we want you as a premium talent to say, hey, this is a Washington commit. That guy's a Washington commit. That guy's a Washington commit. When we talked about the talent that came up on that weekend, it was 4-star galore.
Absolutely. And that's such an interesting part of this when you talk about this official visit, because you look at the other ones where it's Camden Jensen, who's a composite 4-star, Kai Wesley, who's somebody we've talked about a lot, and Landen Miri. Like those are the 4 right now. And it's like, when you look at it, they're definitely taking 2 tight ends at this point in time. These are not visits you've set up if you're not planning on taking multiple guys. The question is who? If I were to say, right now on March 25th, I would bet the 2 end up being Landen Miri and Kai Wesley. But obviously everything is subject to change. And I really like where you're going with that, because it's something you hinted at a little bit on yesterday's show, and something we're certainly going to have to talk about more in the month of April. And as these things start to happen, is there is a commit wave coming. We know that. The question is when, and you talk about Brady Smigel in the wonderful light that you do. And it's always like, it feels like this is, you talk about that straw. It feels like that's the one that it's going to be. And I'm just curious, because it all ties in with everything we've talked about on the recruiting trail today, whether it be Mason James, if you're really going to go hard after Daniel Odom or Madden Williams and get some of these guys to flip, and you look at this 2026 class and you want to pull in a Sam Utu or a Brian Bonner, like all of that needs to start somewhere. And we can sit here and tell you, hey, these things are coming, but it's on the coaching staff now to make sure, hey, yeah, we got to make sure this picks up quick. And I think they will. But you talk about spring practice, where some of these guys will be on official visits during spring practice. I'm sure more will be back on unofficials, and we're going to see that news start to roll in at a certain point in time. But it's just a matter of when is that date going to come?
Exactly. And I think it's the perfect position to be in, but it's also the most frustrating position if you're a fan, because it's great. We have all these names on the board, but it's kind of hard to say until they're committed. Like, hey, like come. And then out of nowhere, it's like, oh, he commits to Notre Dame. Oh, he commits to Georgia or whatever,
sure.
or Oklahoma. It's like, great. Oh, always the bridesmaid, never the bride. And it's like, can we just finally get a win here? And like I said, like I am fully confident in saying when that first one comes where you'll clearly know, hey, like that's the first of many to come. Then you start to get, oh, okay, cool. Now we have 5, 6, 7, 8 guys. Now the class starts to grow, and you go into the summer way more confident.
Lars, as always, thank you so much for being here. Thank all everydayers tuning in. We really do appreciate your support. We got so much more fun stuff coming for you throughout the offseason. So please make sure you subscribe wherever you get your podcast, whether that's YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music. We're there. We're everywhere. We're updating this channel with new content every single day. So make sure you click that like button, click that little bell so you don't miss when we post a new video. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, drop them right down below in the comment section. And if you're audio only, please, if it's 5-star reviews, does help us out a lot. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll talk to you on Thursday.